This is Derek over at PGH Networks. Happy Friday. Welcome to the second episode of Lunchbox Leaders, Cybersecurity Unfiltered. My name, as I said, is Derek Geis. I'm the Director of Sales for PGH Networks. For those of you who don't know who we are PGH Networks is an IT support company that specializes in small to mid-sized businesses. We help people wade through the technology journey and provide help desk support and a plan to keep them moving the business technology forward. The event today, we're going to be introducing another speaker, Matt Solomon with ID Agent. Matt is the Vice President of ID Agent. And today he's going to be talking about digital risk, protecting your most important asset. Matt, I could sit here and introduce you, but I feel like that might be better for you to do it yourself. So it's your time, man.
Yeah, certainly. No, and thank you for Derek. It's a real pleasure to be joining PGH on this webinar. I love always getting a chance to talk to end users in the SMB space. And yeah, my name is Matt Solomon, Vice President of Business Development with ID Agent. I've actually been with ID Agent from the very start. I was employee number one. We came to fruition I guess more officially as a business back in 2015, but really had been poking around in the digital space since 2009. So I've been there for kind of this entire ride. And as this digital space has taken on such new meaning over the last few months and really the last few years, because one of the things we're really going to be talking about here is digital risk, protecting your most important asset. And one of the most important asset really is the credential. That is unfortunately being compromised and sold on the dark web. And so really what I want to do is educate you guys listening today on what risks a compromised credential means to your organization, why it's so important to be monitoring for that, and things beyond that. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the phishing simulations that are phishing attacks that are going on, and give you snapshots. I'm going to actually show you snapshots from the dark web, things that are actually taking place, because it is very common, Derek, that we hear SMBs believe that they are not a target of hackers, and unfortunately, that's really not the case. And we have the proof to really show that. The reality is, you as a small business, your specific business might not be a target, but ultimately, you're getting caught up in these other breaches that put your organization at risk. And so I don't know if you guys have queued up my presentation yet, but we'll kind of start digging in to the right now, if that works.
That sounds good, Matt. I think it's important, as you mentioned, with the small business conversation, the chain is very important. People just don't understand where they fit in the chain of a breach, right? And I think you'll talk about that a little bit throughout this process.
Yep. And are you guys seeing my screen now in terms of the presentation?
I believe so.
Okay.
I can see it right now, Matt.
All right, perfect. Okay. So just starting things off, just wanted to talk about, how are these breaches happening? Again, I mentioned compromised credentials. The reality is almost every breach occurs from some version of an attack that's related to compromised credential. The highest vector is phishing, and we're certainly going to talk a lot about that today. That's the easiest way hackers are able to get compromised credentials. Individuals falling for the phishing email, clicking on things, getting malware put on their computer. Stolen credentials through ransomware, brute force attacks. So there's a lot of different ways it's all happening, but a lot of it does stem from, almost 44% from the phishing simulations. And so one of the things I wanted to do is actually take you back a few years ago and really show you how this started becoming really a thing that people started to understand that was actually affecting them. So it really started back in late 2015 with OPM, which is the Office of Personnel Management. That's when people first started to take notice. So the Office of Personnel Management was hacked. and it was hacked by a single compromised credential that was able to then uncover 800,000 more credentials. And back when this occurred, again, dark web monitoring really wasn't a common thing people were hearing about. Our CEO, Kevin Lancaster, was going into government meetings, having conversations with people that had really no understanding of this. And we actually rolled out a program very similar to LifeLock to the employees of the government. The first million, actually, I think we had about 1.3 million employees enrolled. And what we found was really staggering, which was 73% of those enrolled population of federal employees had a compromised credential on the dark web. So, I mean, just a massive amount of exposure. And what's really scary is that 33% of those emails ended in a .mil and .gov. So you just think about the larger risk of a military and a government employee's exposure. And really the reality is we've found this percentage to be very accurate, even though this was taken back in 2015. I mean, anytime I do scans of companies, I mean, generally we see about 80% of them have a credential exposure on some level. So the exposure risk or the exposure rate is just incredibly high. You know, another one, it's not on my slide, but you know, I bring it up because a lot of people have heard about it, which is that Target breach. And I know that's a big company, but I bring it up to just, again, articulate that a single compromised credential is what caused all of those millions and millions of credit cards to get exposed. And it was from the supply chain. It was from an HVAC vendor that Target used, and it was because a single compromised credential was exposed, and they used that to get into the systems. A little bit of background, just so you know, you're talking to people who do know what they're talking about. You know, and this is one of the really cool things with teaming up with PGH is the stuff that they're using to protect you is actually the exact same stuff that I'm going to be talking to you right now. The Office of Personnel Management, an entire state government, is all using the same software that PGH is using to monitor for the dark web through us. So you're getting that same exact thing. It's no different, but you're getting it at SMB type of level. We work with some of the largest law firms in the world, one of the largest sports leagues in the United States, and some very well-known non-for-profit organizations. So it's really where we cut our teeth originally in this space. Now, one of the things that people, it's very common when you look at a dark web report, you kind of say, well, what does this all mean? And most people focus on the fact that and the risk is that your biggest risk is a network password being exposed, right? Employees using their work email on a third-party website. That's really where all these exposures are taking place. So an employee, decides to log into LinkedIn. They use their work email, and that's a work-related website, so it's probably reasonable to do that. But the unfortunate part is a lot of times they will reuse a network password, a variation of the network password, or even a personal password that could lead to risk to the organization. And unfortunately, hackers have scripts that they can run because every human it falls victim to, oh, I'll add an exclamation point, or I'll add a 1, and the next time I have to change it, I'll add a 2. They actually have scripts that know those patterns, and they can pick up on those patterns. But what is often overlooked is it's not just about the network password being exposed. Again, if they're able to find variations, or say employee A, they get exposed on LinkedIn, and that password from LinkedIn is not a network password, but guess what? They use that same password for ADP, for your CRM system. Think about the access then I could do as a hacker. I could then gain access to every one of your customers, and in a single email ruin your entire reputation of a business within 24 hours. So it isn't just about the network password, and that's why it's really important we put up this slide so that you get that visual of where are your employees logging into. And that's why it's important when you team up with a PGH, have onboarding and offboarding policies. Because unfortunately, many people have the one offboarding policy of changing, taking out your Active Directory. But again, do you know where your employees are actually logging into? Do you have policies around where they're logging into and using your work email? You especially if you're a business owner on the call, you own that domain. They really should not be able to just use it wherever they want, and certainly not without keeping documentation of it. So really important to think about a little bit outside the box. It's not just that network password.
Yeah, so Matt, it's amazing how many new clients we bring on, and we just see so many of them reusing the same password over and over again, and even in their personal life. So they're using their personal their business credential in their personal life, and it's just extremely dangerous, right? And these breaches are happening as you're showing here. They're daily, hourly, to the minute, right? They're happening all the time. So it is a bit scary, and people just don't understand it.
Right. And again, I mean, a lot of these, some of these are work related. You have no idea where your employees are logging into with their work emails. I mean, I always kind of cringe a little bit to bring up the Ashley Madison breach that occurred. But just to give you an example, we talked about .mil and .gov emails earlier. When the Ashley Madison breach occurred, there was 15,000 .mil email addresses in that. And you think about how that can be used, for blackmail purposes and things like that. That's where, you just don't know where your employees are using those emails.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that gets us into a concept we call zero trust. And it's the idea that you have to now assume everybody has been compromised on some level, right? I already mentioned 80% of the scams we run come up with a compromised credential. It'd probably be higher. Sometimes companies change their, may have just come out with a new domain or things like that. So if you actually probably go back to their old domain, there's probably even higher exposure levels. And certainly if we ran personal emails, you'd almost guarantee that's even a higher percentage. So zero trust, again, that's that concept. Assume that everybody's been, compromised on some level. So put the policies and security access management in place. So you've got the right people with the right security access to the right machines with the right privileges, and then on the back end monitoring for those compromised credentials, so you're at least able to see what exposures may already be out there, or if new ones come up. And I think, when we talk about the remote workforce, this couldn't be more important at this point, right? Having that visibility and really control over who has access to what machines in your network. The next part, a lot of people kind of, I think, get bored when you talk about compliance and privacy laws, but I think it's so important to understand that this stuff is happening now. You guys all know about GDPR. We often say GDPR is coming to America. It already has, and it's coming quickly. So California was really the ones who raised the stakes in the United States. They were the first really one with kind of a sweeping privacy act. But then New York Shield Act happened, and what was really interesting with the New York Shield Act is, yes, they had minimum requirements. I want to say it was like 50 employees or more, and then you had to meet those standards. But what's interesting is they're the first state to add language saying, hey, even if you don't meet these requirements of 50 employees or whatever revenue, you better be doing something. And especially if you're a company that is using some type of cyber insurance, you better be showing that you're doing dark web monitoring or phishing simulation security awareness training, because they're going to want to see that. They're going to try to find any reason to not pay, but you need to show them that you're doing some proactive things to make it harder for a hacker to get into your network. And I think it's important to mention, it's not just about if you're a company. So you might be on this and you're saying, I don't have a company in New York or California, it doesn't apply. Well, one, it's coming to your state. I can almost guarantee that. And it's going to be a federal mandate at some point. But what is important is if you work with anybody who works in New York or has clients in New York, things like that, that these things can affect you. So you have to think a little bit beyond. And I know, Derek, I know this was an area that we talked a little bit about in the pre, that you really wanted to kind of get a point across of how important the compliance component is.
It's absolutely important, right? And more industries are putting compliance-based requirements into the industry, right? And it's really just from a perspective. They're trying to protect people's digital identities, right? That's really what it comes down to. I mean, construction industry recently has started deploying the CMMC compliance. And really, I think the key to this is that all clients need to understand, or all businesses need to understand, that you should be focusing on being as secure as the compliance-based industries, just from a protection perspective, right? I mean, that's what you're doing to protect your business. and also your clients, right? And as you mentioned, right, you might have clients that are in these California, New York, even in Europe. Those are very important because, like in the HIPAA compliance-based industry, anybody that even comes close to touching the healthcare industry has to have some type of HIPAA compliance scans and protections in place to even do business, right? So that it's very important that people understand that it's not just the compliance-based industries. It's anybody working around the compliance-based industries. And then for the best thing that you could do for your business, every business should focus on being just at minimal compliant to those compliant-based industries.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the areas we didn't even talk about is, NIST with, federal agencies. So if you want to do business with the government, you have to start meeting their standards, because as Derek mentioned, it's not just about the one company that won the contract. It's all about the subcontractors too, and they won't be able to bring you on as a subcontractor if you don't meet some of these things. And look, take it seriously, but also wear it as a stamp of approval for your own client base. Say, hey, we're, and I don't know all the intricacies of the certifications around this, but being able to state that, hey, we're New York Shield compliant, those will be things that actually could maybe win you business over a competitor, because that's going to force them to ask the question to the other competitor. And maybe you say that, be like, please make sure, choose who you want, but please make sure that they're New York Shield compliant, because we are. So use that as a tool.
Absolutely, man. Very great points, Matt.
Yeah. So kind of switching gears, I mentioned phishing attacks because it's so that is the primary vector for how hackers get compromised credentials. And this is really interesting. And this gets back to, I try to articulate to you that hacking groups they are run like an actual organization. It's not some 16-year-old kid in his basement, although I'm sure that still exists. And this is why I show some of these things, because I need you guys to understand that they are running it like a business, and they are more nimble than regular businesses. Just like everybody, they got hit with COVID too, in terms of they had to change their business model. And I know that sounds crazy to think about, but after about a week of really not a lot less activity, there was a report that went out that said 80% of hacking related activities changed over to COVID related hacks or attacks. And so, the FBI came out saying anticipate. I mean, they came out late, to be honest. I mean, we were seeing these phishing attacks way before they came out with this statement. But I wanted to show you some actual phishing COVID-related attacks that are occurring. This one is one of the more sophisticated ones, because I think a lot of people, know. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's very important. This is why it's so important that security awareness and the idea around security has to be part of a culture of your organization moving forward, even if you're a small business, because your employees have to know these little things to look for so that they can spot phishing emails. And I'll go into the exact ones later, but I think it's important on this one to point out, the fake email address. This is not easy to spot, because it's cdc.gov is the normal email. This is just cdc-gov-org. It's not that far off. And so this is a really tricky one. So very easy to fall for this, being a CDC.gov email. And the other thing, think about seeing this on a mobile device. If you're just quickly glancing at this, very easy to fall for this. And so they're getting super sophisticated. They're pulling out, the logos and everything. I'll show you a couple of the examples of some of the phishing attacks. And I say, encourage people, to use these in your own organization. Show these to your employees so that they are aware. This one's related to workplace policy changes. And I think this is really important, because you think about right now, some offices have started to come back to work. Guess what? Some states are spiking, and they may have to pull their employees back out. Well, that means another email about workplace policies is going to come out. And really, right now, there's probably more workplace policy emails going out than really ever before. And so that, of course, they took advantage of that, and they started putting these out. And it's just, again, it's very easy to not to want to fall for these, but it's very easy to fall for these. And they really try to get you to click on those fraudulent links. Another example, I think everybody's searching for answers on, different safety measures, how to make it more safe. So that's what they're jumping into. Here are some safety measures. Here's a PDF, and of course, if you click on that, it's gonna take you probably most likely to malware. So looking for things, and these really point out, like, of course, poor grammar. Unfortunately, that isn't always the case. It's not always as obvious with a poor grammar, things like that. But one of the things we'll talk about is really having your employees take their time when they're looking at their emails. Here's another example, coronavirus notice. So these are really good ones to show your employees, to show them. I think really the thing I like to let people know is that it's real. These are real. This is not something we designed. These are real phishing attacks that have gone out. The other one, SMS, you think about all the government assistance that's going out. I mean, this is a UK related one, but of course in the United States, with all the different government assistance stuff, SMS, text, phishing simulations are another thing that's become very popular. So just important to be aware of those. And so what we've come up with, and is this idea of good email hygiene. So the CDC has been recommending that you take at least 20 seconds to wash your hands. So we took a spin on that and said, make this part of your company culture. Take 20 seconds. If you are questioning whether an email is real, take the 20 seconds, really look through it, right? And so we'll talk about some of those things that we were looking at on the other screens. Watch for overly generic content and greetings, dear valued customer, right? Instead of it saying, hey, Derek, especially if somebody you actually have a working relationship with, it would be very weird if Derek all of a sudden got an email from me saying, dear valued customer. So look for those types of cues. Examine the entire the from email address. That's probably the easiest way to spot a fake email. Sometimes they're very obvious, other times it's not quite as obvious, but it's important to look at that email, hover over it, see where it came from. That's usually a really good indicator. Urgency is one of the biggest kickers. That should almost be a warning. Anytime somebody tells you you've won or you've got to get back to me in this time period. Now I know people run end of month sales and things like that. But the reality is, funny enough, my uncle called me the other day and said, hey, I just got this email from Apple saying I need to change my Apple ID within the next 24 hours or it's going to be lost forever. And of course, it's a phishing email. So just look for those things that are asking for that urgency. Check all the links. You can actually hover over links. So I don't know if everybody knows that. You can hover over the link. A lot of times it'll tell you where what destination it's going to take you to. So see if that even looks safe. Notice misspellings, incorrect grammar, odd phrasing, because a lot of times the hacking groups are not out of the United States. So the English, the wording of the English might be a little off in how they do it. Again, check for the secure websites, and then don't click on the attachments right away. Examine the email before you do that. And sometimes it's kind of a version of two-factor authentication. Sometimes I make phone calls to people and I say, did you just send me this? Or Teams them, or whatever you need to do to make sure. Double check, and just anything that's out of the ordinary, always double check. You're never going to get a CEO of your company is never going to get upset with you for saying, why did you double check with me on this? And no one's asking, I shouldn't say this, but generally, and I bring this one up because we've seen people fall for it. Most CEOs are not messaging you asking for you to buy $400, $500 gift cards and scratching off the number on the back. So I bring that one up because I know people fall for that. So please don't do that.
Yeah, that's an amazing one. We have actually seen it happen, right?
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, they are making these are real life, right? So likely what's happened is they're following the business's LinkedIn account or something along those lines. They know who the president is. You post on LinkedIn that you just hired a new employee. You give the employee information. They figure out the email address, right? Because they know the way that the email address is crafted, and then bada bing, bada boom, they fish that new employee, tell them to buy $2,000 in gift cards, and all of a sudden they're scratching that off, trying to show the CEO that they're willing and able to do anything and show some value. I mean, it definitely happens.
Yep.
Very, very interesting one.
Yeah, I actually had at my former company, somebody spent $2,500 of their own money, and she got very lucky. The CEO, chalked it up to a business expense, but man, I mean that's a tough pill to swallow.
The other one that we're seeing, as far as you talked about the attachments or the links, right, is OneDrive. We're seeing
big time.
That's the hot one right now. It seems to be they're sending out a OneDrive link, and it's asking you to basically put in your credentials to view the link. And so basically what they're doing is they're getting your email credentials, and now they have a login to your Office 365 account, and then they use it as a way to forward their information to all your contacts. And that's how this all grows, right? And they get these contacts, and then on the dark web they sell them. And I'm sure that we'll talk through some of that a little bit as we get through here. But I mean, these things exist, and at the end of the day, I think the important piece to this for people to understand is how easy it is for people to create a phishing email, right? It's just a matter of putting the email together and then sending a blast to 5,000, 10,000, 15, 20,000 people. And they only need a small percentage to get to be successful, right? And then it just kind of goes from there.
Yeah.
So, very interesting.
And you set up my next slide. Phishing kits, looking for a project. So the reality is anybody can become a hacker overnight if they want to be. You can buy a step-by-step guide. In this case, it was a step-by-step guide to hack fake Facebook IDs. It's the same concept Derek just talked about. It's the idea of getting somebody's Facebook account information, and then think about the access the hacker then has to everything about you. And that's when they create the really super sophisticated phishing email, because they can say, hey, they can pretend they're you, and they can say, hey, Derek, that concert last year was so awesome, that that Coldplay concert we went to, or whatever it is, because they know all this information. That's social engineering at its finest. And so they take all that information and they really can actually target you. So I'm showing you one of our inside people. He followed this kind of step-by-step guide to really demonstrate how spot on you can do these things. So these are, one is a fake Facebook account or landing page, and one is a real one. So I always forget the fake and the real, but I believe the fake's the left one because of the .html. But that is the only thing you can notice as the difference is because the Pantone colors are the same, the logo is the same, and God, imagine again thinking about if you're doing this on a mobile device, you're not telling the difference. It's very difficult. Here's a couple other examples: the eBay login from a single sign-on type of thing, and a government website. So just almost impossible to tell the difference right there. So that's the sophistication level of these, and that's why it's so important to recognize the phishing email before you get on the landing page, because these landing pages are dead spot on to the real landing pages.
Yeah, I mean, and once again, it only takes a matter of them creating this one time, right? Yep. And then they can get it out to the masses. So it's not like they have to consistently update the information or anything like that. Really, it's just one create, and then 75 hackers use the same pages, right? And they grab this information. So it's really, we're at a big disadvantage at the end of the day, because businesses move very fast, people move very fast, and it's really hard to look at this stuff in detail on an ongoing basis. But I mean, that's the day we live in.
Yeah, and that's why they also need partners like you to make it easier. Nothing's foolproof, but again, that's why you're going to hear me repeat, which is this has to be part of your culture. Your employees have to be thinking about this stuff. So again, now I'm going to give you some other snapshots from the dark web. And again, this is to articulate it's being run like a business. So this is a credit card dump website. Thank you for giving us another chance to provide you with the best credit cards. So now we're talking about customer service on the dark web. Here's another example, and this proves out to show, hey, you are a target, whether you realize it or not. So this is somebody looking for the latest leaked databases. Can anyone help me find some of the latest databases? So this is Time Warner Cable. If you know anything about Time Warner Cable business class, their business class makes up a whole slew, range of size organizations. So from small to mid-size to large. So right there, you could also be swept up. And again, so it's not that, hey, they're going after manufacturing company A, but if you're part of a Time Warner Cable and you fall into this category of business class, you're swept into the breach. So you are a target, whether directly or not. I always like to just show this, just to show you the kind of the range of data that's out there on the dark web. It's not just compromised credentials. I mean, there's much worse. There's firearms, there's human trafficking. We don't get into that stuff, but even voter databases are out there. So this one's Kansas voter database. So the information, IDs, full names, physical addresses. And again, this is important because again, individuals are already being exposed. And it's not just Kansas. I think this was the snapshot that he took. It was really almost every state's voter database is out there on the dark web. So, they're taking advantage of people on the personal level and on a corporate level as well. This one I like to talk about because I think not everybody's heard of what the media called the mega breach. It was really kind of a buzzworthy thing that they tried to do, which is there was a collection. It was called Database Collections 1 through 5. AKA the mega breach. Really what it was a collection of a large set of breaches that had occurred over the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years, but it was over 773 million unique emails with passwords. And again, as Derek was talking about, the fact that people repeat passwords, even if the data was from 3 years ago, the password could be something they use. So and here's the scary thing. They were selling it for $10. The entire database, which it sounds counterintuitive in a way, but the reason it was being sold for that is because it was all recycled data. A lot of this data had already been out there. So the value goes down because that means more people had access to it. But to me, the scary part is, and I don't know which is scarier, because when you make it available at $10, that means anybody can buy it, right? Anybody can have access if they know how to buy this stuff. Which means more people then have your email and password and can do things with it. And then as we talked about, the customer service side, just like on Amazon, there's the communication ratings, there's the quality of data rating. I'm not kidding. If you are on the dark web and you start providing bad data, they will give you terrible reviews and you won't make money. So that's why it's, like I say, it is being run like a business. Again, we talk about small businesses being targeted. So this is related to credit card dumps out of Florida, out of Miami. This is a holiday discount they decided to offer. So your business card's being sold with a holiday discount. So they are doing, running the same type of marketing campaigns that you would as a company. Most companies run some type of holiday campaign. So do they on the dark web. Again, targeting small businesses, 300 business fools of California business owners. So there's two things I want to point out. The word fools, F-U-L-L-Z, means there's enough information in the database that they're providing to perform identity theft. So obviously not a good thing that there's enough information in this. The other part is it says high credit scores. So this means that they're curating the data and giving you the best credit score rating businesses on this. So again, that's the customer service side. And this one, they basically said was so popular. I mean, it was so popular, it sold out. So that's the supply and demand. So it looks like they made it available for only a few people because then the value of that data is higher.
It's amazing. I mean, highest credit scores, right? What does that mean? It means, hey, I can spend as much money as I want on this credit account. That's really the brilliance of it. And people don't fully understand. They think, hey, I'm a small business. They don't care about my data. They don't care about your data. Right. They do not care about your data. You're just a person on the list, right? But your business might have a very high credit score. Might have, right? They could grab 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand. And if they do that 15, 20 times in a month, they're making some serious money there.
Yeah. And I try to tell people I'm here to educate you. I'm not, and I get it. Like people can walk away feeling a little scared about this stuff, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think there's things that you should be worried about, and that's the point of teaming up and making sure you're putting these security things in place. But the reality is, there's been reports, that 60% of SMBs go out of business within 6 months of an attack. So most SMBs are not in a position to handle a ransomware attack on their business. So that's why it's so important to take, whatever investment in things like this and the trainings to get ahead of this issue and make it harder, because the harder you make it, the more likely they are to move on. Trust me, they do not want to spend time trying to get in if it can't. easily.
Well, and the interesting part is the thing you have to understand is right now we are going through this situation with COVID, and that's been difficult enough, right? And since we are moving to that remote workforce, a lot of companies are moving to the remote workforce. It's now become more of an opportunity for these hackers to really attack. So now you've got COVID going on, you've got the remote workforce happening, and you have these hackers coming in and really trying to corrupt your business. I mean, it can be pretty difficult on a small business, right now, because if you're not really kind of careful, it makes it really easy to kind of put somebody out of business right now. So you really have to protect yourself even more today than you ever did.
Yeah, I mean, the remote part, it's put you your organization so much more at risk because you've got employees logging into personal computers, whatever Internet of Things they have. You might not believe that a hacker can jump from a Wi-Fi refrigerator, but they can. They have those capabilities. There was you should look up the story of it was in Vegas. It was like a smart aquarium in one of the casinos, and the hacker was able to get into the smart aquarium and went from the smart aquarium into the casino. So that stuff exists, and now more than ever because everybody's at home, and they've got so many more endpoints that are really unmanaged by you unless you're aware of them. I won't do a deep dive into this, but this is a new tactic. It's called ransomware to public extortion. So most security experts will tell you if you get hit with ransomware, you should not pay the ransom. And there's a couple reasons. One, there's no guarantee you're going to get the data. You might pay the ransom and they're going to tell you they're going to give you data, and they may not give it to you. And two, you pay the ransom and they give you back the data. What's not to say that they don't stay on your system or come back to you again? Because once you're willing to pay, they know that you are willing to pay the ransom. So generally the theory's been don't pay, but now hackers have kind of come onto this, and now they're doing this thing called public extortion, and it's really interesting what they've done. And I'll give you the example: the exchange, TravelX, and they got hit with ransomware. And originally we're not willing to pay, and I don't remember how this it says TravelX reportedly paid 2.3 million. So actually it's Maze that I wanted to talk about. Sorry. So Maze said, we don't believe you. We're not paying you for the data. But then the hacker said, well, we're going to put it out there and say, put it out in the public forum that we've got your information. So we're going to put it out on the dark web. And because of GDPR laws, they were going to have a whole issue with that, because then they would actually have to self-report this at the time, and they may have not been ready. So it went into this whole public extortion thing. So it's just an interesting twist. I just wanted to bring it up because it's a new thing that hackers are doing, which is, again, evolving with the marketplace. The other thing is ransomware as a service. This is one of our inside people got this. I think it's for like $99. This is insane. For $99, you can get a multi-tenant white labeled account to run ransomware attacks. Just like Derek was talking about, like the 20, 30,000 capabilities, you can do that all within this platform. So it's pretty insane what's out there. But I show this to show you the sophistication levels of these hackers.
We talk about this during our client trainings when we're doing security trainings, and we say, look, there are companies out there just like PGH Networks, managed service providers, that are focusing on providing support for hackers, right?
Right.
That's what they're doing. They're the help desk. They're the ones that are creating the malware. If you're having a problem, hey, just call us, and then we'll take a small percentage of whatever fees you get back. It's pretty amazing. This dashboard is insane.
Yeah, I mean, total infections, ransom builder. I mean, it's quite mind-boggling. It's when we show this slide at events, we get more people like with their camera, like their phones out, taking snapshots of it, because it's almost hard to believe that this is a real thing, but it is. The other thing, this used to be a very popular slide as well, which is how much they pay. This is a real ad. They're called the Dark Overlords, and they are looking for somebody with 10 years experience with innovative approaches to operations and thinking outside the box. It's no different than anybody looking for business. That's the type of language you'd use. The difference is they pay $762,000 a year with an expected increase based on performance reviews and things like that. So,
cha-ching.
Yeah, exactly. and bringing this a little bit closer to home, I mean, I think everybody was aware at first that Zoom had all kinds of security issues when everybody shifted. A lot of the verified accounts were being posted on the dark web. And, I do always preface, Zoom did an incredible job of reacting to this, and they put a ton of money, and they fixed a lot of the security issues really quickly. But just, again, it's that nimbleness of the hackers. They all of a sudden, I mean, no one was talking about Zoom accounts on the dark web until COVID hit. So it's just how quickly they shift their targets.
Well, they shift their targets, and at the end of the day, they really only have to win one time, right? I mean, they only have to be right once, and it from a protection perspective, we have to be right every time. And I think that's the important thing for people to understand. It's like, look, all the software in the world, all of everything that you put together is only going to get you to maybe that 99% secure, right? And then it's things like this, like these trainings that we're doing, that really get you that extra 1%, and you're still, and these things are constantly evolving. And so I think it's important for people to understand that this is absolutely what you need to be doing for your business, is making sure that your end users understand this stuff.
Yeah. And so kind of the last slide we'll leave you with, and some of these are obvious, but I also think it's important to maybe print this out for your employees, have them put it in front of their desks, so that it's just, again, when we talk about being part of the culture, they're constantly getting these messages about security. Think about rolling out security awareness training to them, making sure that they understand how they can help. We've seen companies do rewards around it. Hey, if you're sending, whoever sends, it's not that you'd say maybe send whoever sends the most phishing emails, but as long as they're actually participating in forwarding phishing emails that don't look suspicious to PGH or whatever the process that's set in place to handle those, just get them involved and reward them for participating. So number one, get the facts. You've got partners like PGH. Go to the experts. It's more critical than ever on the security side to listen to the experts. They're teaming up with vendors like us, who this is all we're thinking about, and they're parlaying a lot of that information to you. So that's one of their jobs, is to get that information to you. So making sure you're getting it from reliable sources. Of course, we think twice before clicking links. We talked a lot about that because of those phishing emails. Be suspicious of those expected attachments. Even if they look official, you'd be surprised how many times it's fake. Kind of do that two-factor version of authentication. Reach back out to the person, make sure that they meant to send it, and don't necessarily send them an email, because their email may have been hacked. Make a phone call, send them a text, maybe go through Teams, whatever other way you have to communicate. Do that.
That's really an important one that I just want to make sure that we hit on again. Is you're not just two-factor is a kind of buzzword in the industry, but as he mentioned, two different forms of how you're verifying if in fact the information coming from somebody is valid, right? You get this spreadsheet, you get this attachment, you get this link from somebody. Give them a phone call, send them a text message, whatever you need to do to make sure that thing is accurate and it's viable. If you're getting something that's basically coming from somebody that was unexpected, probably even more concerning, that you need to make sure that so this is just the world we live in nowadays. You have to just be uber cautious.
Yep. We talked about compliance. There's some automation tools to make that easier for you. Of course, protecting your passwords, so encouraging better practices around the different passwords being used, not repeating passwords, potentially using a password manager. Obviously, not writing them on sticky notes, which I promise you still exists. You know who you are out there. Ask for help. Again, reach out to PGH if you have questions. And then again, the beauty of the relationship that they have with their vendors like us is, if they don't know the answer, they have subject matter experts they can reach out to. We actually have ethical people, on the dark web doing things. They can tap into that resource. Stay current on the threats. Again, being aware of what's going. You can follow, like, if you even just a hashtag on LinkedIn, if you do a hashtag breach or do Google alerts, that's something I subscribe to every day with the word breach in it. So anything that there's news about new breaches, I get to hear about them. I get to read the new threats. Of course, keep an eye on the bad guys, monitoring for the dark web, getting those being aware of those compromised credentials so that you can actually do something about it. And the beauty of the data from the dark web is, not only are you getting all the historical data, but you're getting any new compromised credential, but it allows you to really roll out these policies to your rest of your staff. Because I understand staff is reluctant to do things where it gets to two-factor authentication. They are reluctant to do these things, but when you actually show them a report and say, hey, look, your email and password's been exposed 3 times on the dark web. We did a phishing simulation. 50% of the employees at this organization, unfortunately fell for that phishing simulation. This is why we are rolling out two-factor authentication, which is that next layer. I always like to tell people two-factor is not foolproof, but it is an important element, and it makes it harder. Just think about, let's try to make it simple. Think about you live in a neighborhood and you've got an alarm system. You put that sign up in front. The reason you put that sign up in front is because you want everybody to know you have an alarm system. So if somebody's going to come break in, the chances of them skipping your house is much higher. And it's the same thing with hackers. They're not looking to spend a lot of time. That's not how they make money. They make money, like we talked about, in bulk and getting into the easiest targets. So by making it harder with two-factor authentication, a lot of times you're going to bypass those efforts and make it harder where they're not going to go back to you. And then be wary of strange networks, especially with Wi-Fi networks right now. Not tapping into one you don't own, things like that. So those are the different ones that we wanted to talk about today. And I don't know, Derek, if there's any questions that came out from the group, but I hope you found it informative. I promise I don't mean to scare people. I'm just really trying to educate you on what threats exist in the marketplace.
Well, unfortunately, security is a bit of a doom and gloom scenario. It just is what it is, right? I mean, it's just the nature of what it is. But I think it is important that people understand what types of things are out there to be, so that they're educated properly, right? I think that's massively important. So as you had mentioned, we work at PGH. We work directly with ID Agent. We put ID Agent's dark web monitoring on all of our agreements for our clients, right? And really, at the end of the day, we believe, and we're hearing it from the experts, like Matt and ID Agent and a few of our other IT security companies, that it really comes down to having a layered security approach. And as part of that layer, that dark web monitoring is kind of that last layer of security, right? It's recognizing when something has happened, or recognizing that, hey, something got leaked, because it's not a matter of if it gets leaked, it's a matter of when, right? Because there's too many companies being breached. So, Matt, from your perspective, where do you think you guys add a lot of value into that layered approach? I mean, I know you guys have a few different offerings that you have. I mean, where do you think you sit in that approach?
We've got the dark web monitoring, and often the question is, what next, right? We know we have a compromised credential, and obviously changing passwords, number one. If it's an active password, that's going to be the number one thing you do. But for, if you're the CEO of a company, of a small business, how do we then take that information and, what's the next stages? And a lot of times that can revolve around implementing the phishing simulations, implementing security awareness training. We had a small business. They had 25 employees. They had a phishing simulation sent out. 92% of them clicked on the email, which is a terrible number. But what was worse is 54% of them submitted the credentials. So just like the OneDrive thing, it asked them to submit the credentials, and 54%. So what ends up happening, though, is that CEO then was able to go to his staff and say, look, we had 25 exposures on the dark web of compromised credentials, and 54% of the employees just, submitted. I'm not mad, but what this is telling me is we need to start instituting security policies. And so, because a lot of times people don't roll out these policies because they're afraid of the pushback. No one wants two-factor authentication. I get it. It's a pain in the butt sometimes, but it's the fact that you need it. You need these things.
And honestly, at the end of the day, like companies like Microsoft, they've really made two-factor authentication very a lot less intensive as far as how often you have to authenticate, and if you're using certain types of devices and things, and if you're in your office versus working from home or whatnot, they've made it pretty easy. And I think the fear of it is more a concern than the actual doing of setting it and implementing it. From what we've seen.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, a couple questions arise a lot of times when we're talking to people about dark web monitoring and we're telling them that they need to be monitoring the dark web and looking at passwords. Like we'll run lists, right? And it's amazing though when you run the list and the first thing they want to look at is they go, well, these are old employees. Like I don't have these employees anymore. These passwords aren't valid. What does that matter? Like why should they care about that?
Yeah, and so that almost goes back to one of the original slides I showed, which is it's not just about the network password, it's about where people were logging in and did you have offboarding policies to do anything about it. So I'm going to give you a real life example. There was a case where the company had that reaction. We said, what was this employee's role and what could they have been logged into? Like what work related things outside of the network? And they said, well, they worked in, HR, they had access to, our ADP, our CRM systems and whatever. And this is a person that had been there in 3 years. So we worked with them. I mean, they did the logging in. They logged in to 4 different accounts that were still active, including Office Depot, which had access to their ACH banking information, their CRM system, which had access to every one of their customers. And again, you think about the damage, you could send out a single terrible message to every one of their customers saying, I mean, I don't even want to say what you could say, but whatever you say, you could disparage every one of your customers within 24 hours if you have access to a CRM system. And so that's where older employee data still matters because you likely only shut off their Active Directory. You didn't even realize that you needed to shut off these accounts. There was another example. They logged in to an account where the person had been there in it's very similar, 3 years. The bank password for the company was still active. It had $1 million in cash, this bank account. Now, luckily, a hacker hadn't either realized it or whatever, but without that dark web monitoring, they would have never been aware of it, and who knows what would have happened, but they were at least able to do something about it before something happened.
Yeah, it's amazing. When we do our trainings, we've kind of looked at some of the dark web, like what things go for on the dark web, and some of the stuff it's so inexpensive, right? You get a bank login or a bank account login for like $100.
All about bulk.
Right? Like, I mean, they're selling these things off like hotcakes, and people just don't realize it. So the other thing that we really find interesting is when we do run a search, like if we're looking at a potential client, we'll run a search and we'll pull a list of their employees based on their domain and we can see the first 4 of their password and you just say, hey, have you ever used a password that starts with 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever? And they go, oh my God, how'd you know that? And it's like, well, if you sign up, we can actually get a little deeper than that, right? And it kind of blows their mind. And honestly, I think that's really what differentiates you guys. I know there's other tools out there like Have I Been Pwned? But what we're seeing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're not actually seeing the passwords that get released, right? With your service, we're actually able to show them the passwords that are released, which is going to allow them to be a lot more proactive about protection and evasion during these situations, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Have I Been Pwned has its place, but it's certainly not anything close yet. Number one, it does not show passwords, which means it doesn't empower you as a CEO of a company to talk to your employees about being exposed because you don't have any way of verifying whether that's a real exposure. They pull in massive lists. They don't necessarily verify those lists. So they might say they just pulled in, 100 million new records, but they're not doing a verification thing. We actually have human intelligence. That's a really important, those 2 distinctions are probably the biggest thing for your end users and the people listening today. It's 1, password. You have to be able to see the password to be able to really make real change. And then 2, that human intelligence side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt, I think we're getting to the point where we're starting to run out of time. I think just to kind of recap everything, right? So the importance of a layered security approach as part of that layer, education is absolutely important, right? I think we can agree with that. And also monitor just in case. Make sure that you are able to monitor, and if something does arise, and then for heaven's sake, two-factor everything. Turn on two-factor for everything. Use two factors to verify, and that zero trust, right? Everybody's been breached. Yep. Assume everybody's been breached and protect yourself. Is that fair to say?
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
Awesome, Matt. So really, I want to take a minute to thank you so much. For everybody that has joined, thank you. We had some technical difficulties. It seems like it was a Microsoft issue. So just so you're aware, we have been recording this. I wanted to just let you guys know that we will be sending that recording out shortly following. Also, please be aware we did send out some Grubhub vouchers to the first 50 that attended. So please check your spam filters if for some reason you didn't receive your Grubhub voucher. If you have any issues, just send an email over to marketing@pghnetworks.com, and we'll make sure that we get that squared away for you. As far as the next steps are concerned, one, make sure you re-register for our next event coming up. It's going to be episode 3 of Lunchbox Leaders, Cybersecurity Unfiltered. And we will be hosting that event, I believe, on August 20th. So please make sure that'll be coming out soon. I would like to take a few minutes to thank Matt and his team at ID Agent. I'd like to thank Nicole Murtho and the rest of the PGH Networks team. And I'd like to also thank our marketing company, Spark Designs, for helping us put this together once again. And I think right now we're actually going to be going to the Wheel of Names. So we are going to be raffling off a Google Nest to try and keep people cool during this hot summer. So Nicole, if you could go ahead and spin that Wheel of Names, and let's see who we get. Here we go. Here we go. So congratulations, Christy Sutton. You are the winner of a Google Nest. We will be sending out that Google Nest. We will grab your shipping information from you following the event. Once again, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next month. Have a great one. Bye.